Lovely. Hi. Well, thank you to the two folks who showed up. But anyways, there are loads of, well, about 10 people on Zoom right now, and I expect folks to tune in a little later as well as Facebook Live. And I'm happy that the mask feature is now off because that was a little disconcerting. Although that is very appropriate, is it not? So anyways, welcome folks. Tonight is our third community conversation. And the point of these conversations is really to recap the project, to also talk about developments. This is a long process. And I think since 2019, we've had over 40 meetings with the SBC community forums, etc. So this is a continuation, and we're hoping that people will have Q&As at the end, either via Zoom. I'm afraid we can't monitor Facebook Live unless Leo can do that. So anyways, right now I'd like to introduce Mike Quinlan, the chair. But before that, you know, and I know we want to get going because it's so hot, but a thought came to my mind earlier today that I was at a school function or a town function where you actually volunteered your services. Umpteen years ago, they were talking about a project, and you went up to the person who was in charge of the permanent building committee, and you said, "Hi, my name is Mike Quinlan, and I'd like to help. I'm an architect." And I thought to myself, what a good dude. And here we are, umpteen years later. And you're still a good dude. So anyways, and we've got Jeff Marsden, superintendent of schools, and Steve Brennan, the principal of Dale, and Emily Ramstaff Rice, Dynamo architect. And anyways, I think we shall start because we're schwitzing in here.
So
all
we
right.
can make it quick.
We're talking and I'll sign the red.
Again, thanks everyone for coming. My name is Jeff Marsden, your superintendent. We're going to talk a little bit about the educational benefits tonight. I know we've discussed that before in a couple of our other meetings. We'll just review that quickly. Steve Brennan will do a slide as well as soon as I'm done. I'll animate fixing the camera. There we go. So we'll overview this evening, looking at the educational benefits, going through the building design process, sustainability of the environment, and then future flexibility. So all really good topics that relate to the building project that we're excited to talk about tonight. So the first part, looking at educational benefits. One of the things that we've talked about is our structure in Medfield is unique in the sense that we don't have neighborhood schools for elementary schools. So all of our kids, K-12, attend all the exact same schools together in a cohort, which is unique. I only can think of maybe 2 or 3 other communities in the state that do it that way. But that comes with challenges as well. So one of the challenges that we have is that it's difficult for transitions for kids that have difficulty with transitions going through a new school every couple of years. So it may not be an issue for every kid, but we've received feedback through surveys, through parent feedback, that is really a challenge for some kids. And by having a campus-style setting with grades 2 through 5 on the same campus, it will allow kids to have a much smoother transition because they're used to being on that campus, just going a couple of feet right down the door to a new school. Also, it's a better opportunity for us to share staff and resources. And one of the other things that is a challenge is that when you have 3 separate elementary schools and they serve as 3 separate grade spans, sharing staff can sometimes be a challenge. So by having it all on the same campus, that will certainly help us out as well. And then programming, in our last community conversation, our director of people services, Mary Gould, went through in detail the programming challenges that we have with our structure, but this will really help with the unified campus over really help our programming as well. One of the things that we are actually finishing up our 5-year strategic plan this year and starting a new one. But one of the things that we identified as a really important thing was collaboration among teachers. And by having those 2 schools, the Wheelock and the new elementary school on the same campus, this will allow us to have much more collaboration with teachers. They can just walk across the courtyard to have meetings instead of trying to plan for a half day once a month to get teachers together or after after schools. That's another real important bonus for us. Certainly the larger site, we know that Wheelock has the soccer field and all the area to the left behind the school. But right behind the school where we'd like to build the new school is a great space to not only house our new school, but provide outdoor learning opportunities for our kids. And that's something that we value and something that came out of the community conversations that we had almost 2 years ago now when we were looking at this. The outdoor learning, which I talked about, that was really an important piece for the community conversations that we had when we were looking at the visioning sessions with our consultant. Both parents, teachers, and even students that night talked about the importance of that. And then, looking at the site circulation, the renderings that we've seen in the massive studies that have gone on with the new school, it really improves the entire site. So we were looking at just having a Wheelock school. There's many issues with Wheelock school around traffic and issues around parent drop-off and bus drop-off. With the new school, we mitigate those issues as well. So it really provides a really nice campus setting for us. So all of our kids in the town of Medfield can attend the same site, grade students apply. Steve?
Thanks, Jeff. For everybody out there, my name is Steve Brenham, and I'm the principal at Dale Street School. So thank you for coming. And I want to thank Anna May and her communications department because it takes a lot of work to get this out in a lot of different venues. So it's really important news. So I'm glad that people are tuning in. I'm going to talk about two things, piggyback off what Jeff was saying. The first thing I'm going to talk about a little bit is the outdoor resources that we have at the Wheelock location. And the other that I'm going to talk about is the shared staff and the resources that we have at that location. Jeff had touched on it that one of the things that we did when we were looking at the educational plan was we looked at the importance of outdoor learning. If you look at any of the science standards right now, to get kids hands-on, get outside, it was actually, of all things, a silver lining last year during the pandemic that a lot of the teachers spent a lot of time outdoor educating students. And we just found that it was such a great way for kids to learn, got them outdoors in the fresh air. And this site at the Wheelock School offers us the property that can allow us to do many, many things over there. Science just is one of the subject areas. Another thing that I've had some discussions with Holly Caulfield, the principal of the Wheelock School, is that they have the Victory Garden there. It's something that the kids here at Dale Street talk about all the time. We really just don't have the space to have a Victory Garden. So the opportunity to share with the second and third grade and participate that and keep that going for a 4-year process is really, really something that's fantastic for our students, and our teachers have been talking a lot about it. One of the other things that we mentioned in our other community forums, and for people that are new with this, is we have a great thing here that we received from grants called the walking classroom. And a walking classroom is like an old kind of 1980 Walkman, if you will. It has all educational stories on there with a lot of different genres, a lot of different content. So what teachers will do here is they'll sign out the walking classroom and they'll start a mini lesson by doing that outside. And they do it here, they walk all the way down to Memorial, they go on Adams Street, and they listen to something, a topic. It could be something from history, let's say. And then when they come back in, they'll have a brief conversation outside about it, and then it powers the lesson to go to the next level. Well, Arrow Street has done a wonderful job by creating a nice walking path that the teachers can use. It's off the road, that has no dangers to students whatsoever, and it would be a fantastic place there. Unfortunately, when you're here at Dale Street, it doesn't provide the opportunity to have that open space. So the outdoor teaching and learning for students would be incredible there. It's something we're dying to get into. The second thing that I mentioned I was going to talk about is shared resources, and Jeff mentioned that as well. But one of the things that is important is we have a lot of shared staff in the building. They could be specialists, they could be music, they could be our occupational therapists called OTs, or our physical therapists, PTs, and they're shared throughout the building. So not only to have a closer proximity that would allow less travel time for them, it would also allow spaces. So I think about our kids, and I've talked to Holly about this as well, and also Mary Brew, our director of student services, is a lot of times as kids in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade will utilize the same type of mechanisms to help where they need interventions in our OT and PT. And I think to have a state-of-the-art place where not only the fourth and fifth graders could use that, but our physical therapists and our occupational therapists could also use that with second and third grade. And again, state of the art would be absolutely outstanding. A lot of our curriculum that was studied over the last 20 years is written 3 through 5. So what a great opportunity it is to have our 4th and 5th grade teachers to meet up with our 3rd grade teachers. They don't have to travel here. They could do it during a special time. We could create a half-day PE for them to do it, where it's less travel time for them to do. And again, it's going to put the curriculum, you know, they work really hard right now, but it just creates an easier opportunity to make it more systemic for them and making it better for the kids, knowing that the expectations that are in 3rd grade and that are going in 4th grade and that are going in 5th grade. So the opportunity and proximity there is incredible. And the last thing that I'll mention is that Arrow Street, if you haven't seen the renderings, has done a wonderful job with the new elementary school at the Wheelock site. So for the students at Wheelock, and I've again had conversations with Holly about this, with the opportunity, whether to use the music spaces or to use the gymnasium or use some of the outdoor spaces for the walking classroom, not only benefits the 4th and 5th graders, it's also going to benefit our 2nd and 3rd graders as well. And we work very closely together, Dr. Billsborough, Mrs. Caulfield, and myself, and this is just a great opportunity where kids are more closely aligned by age to make sure that they're enjoying this brand new state-of-the-art, incredible elementary school. So just a couple more resources that really having this new school at this site that we want will be extremely beneficial for the students and the staff. That's okay. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Good evening. My apologies. I feel like I'm working on multiple levels and I have a really good appreciation for teachers who did hybrid learning. So my name is Ellen Price. I'm an architect with Arrow Street. I've been working on those projects for a while. Pre-COVID. I want to talk a little bit about some of the architectural features. I'm going to put my keyboard down here for a second. So one of the things that really sets this building apart is that it is placed next to the Wheelock School, right? And I'll step into the camera so people can see me online. So on the Wheelock campus, you can see it's just south of the existing Wheelock School, and it's creating spaces around it that will stimulate outdoor play, similar to what Principal Running said. And it's also creating opportunities for improved parking and site circulation. So this is an aerial view of the project looking north, and you can see that it's a slightly larger size compared to the existing Wheelock School. It is designed to house grade 4 and 5, but with an increased capacity of what this school that we're in right now does. And the black that you see on top of the roof is photovoltaic panels. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So this is another rendering, and this one you can see from Wheelock in the foreground and the new elementary school in the background. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the safety and security features. So there's clear separation in the way that we're designing the parking lot and the bus drop-off, so that pedestrians and drop-off happen in different pathways. And it will also have clear views from the site to entrances and windows, and it allows emergency vehicles to access the schools very easily, which is important for adverse events, which don't happen, but they do. So this is a view of what the school will look as we approach it. And in the design of elementary schools, we always want to make sure it's welcoming, it's appropriately sized. When you think about sort of the size of kids versus our buildings, you want to make sure that it's not too oppressive. So pulling on some of the motifs that we've seen in Medfield with the roof line, ways in which we can build on the scale of the building, especially the entrance. So a kid approaching it feels like this is something for them and it's welcoming. Some of the things that we built into this building that aren't apparent on first blush is daylighting. So making sure that we're maximizing the amount of windows as well as improving indoor air quality. A lot of that conversation has happened over the last year in terms of making sure that there's enough fresh air intake and air exchange going through. The classrooms are right sized. In other words, they're designed for what the state believes is the right size for a classroom. The state uses 23 students per classroom as a guideline. And I know that Medfield's student-teacher ratio is slightly different than that, but the classrooms are built for the right size students and where they are today in 2021 and in the future, as well as incorporating a lot of ancillary spaces that support needs of all students, including OT, special education, and small group learning areas. So this is a view of what it looks like once you've entered the school and you're looking down. I call it Main Street, but I know others have called it other things, the main hallway. And you're looking towards the classroom wing. So there's kind of two halves to the building. One holds a lot of community type spaces, larger classroom type spaces. And then there's a section where there's the classroom wing, and I'll get into that a little bit. So this is in the same spot. If you turn a little to the left, you're approaching what would be the gymnasium and the main hallway, looking down. Looking back from the other way, you can see there's a lot of light coming into this, and it's important to also be able to see outside. If you think about this room, you really kind of have just one little spot, right, where you can see daylight. It's really important for kids and their sort of psychological well-being to be able to connect to nature and to understand where they are in the place, not just during the day, but in the world. This is an image of the band room. So the music program in Medfield is like one I've seen nowhere else in other schools. You have such a rich music program, and there is a great need for multiple music spaces between strings, between choral, between band, and really having spaces that support the programs that you need rather than trying to stick them in other places. This is a rendering from the courtyard. So there's a space in between where you can, we've talked about some of the outdoor learning. This is what we call the media center, which is kind of a new word for library, right? So what's unique about the way in which media is taught here at this school is very social, and ways in which you can bring kids in, get them to reflect on the learning, as well as come together and have individual groups and large groups. One of the features that's the end of the main hallway is something that we're calling the Learning Commons. And it is one of the ways in which we are combining what would be the stair that brings from the first floor to the second floor to also have a social space where you can have perhaps more than one classroom come together and have small presentations. Spaces like this, where kids can define some of the uses of it and gather together in multiple sizes of groups, are ways in which you can increase some of the informal learning, as well as ways in which you can bring in extra enrichment, which is really important at this age level. Here's another rendering from the courtyard, the cafeteria, right? We all have stories of cafeteria like when we were in school. One of the things that is unique about the new cafeteria is ways in which we can support the performing arts and the delivery of the ways in which we can support students coming together to recognize others. That type of performance space, you have a little bit in the gym over here, but it's not ADA accessible, and it doesn't hold the capacity that one would need to support the size of the school that you have. So right sizing the cafeteria and making sure that it is something that is acoustically appropriate. What you're seeing now is in the classroom hallway. So these are where the classrooms for grades 4 and 5 would be. We took great care to think about ways in which the hallway can be activated. So how can we have students, if they have a small group enrichment or they need some breakout space, there are small rooms along the hallway to be able to accommodate students for those types of special work, as well as ways in which they can take some of the learning that happens in the classroom out into the hallway and utilize it as best as we can. Again, looking at the end of the hallway, making sure that you can see out and have daylight. And I'm going to show you some of the images inside the classroom, but here's another view. And what we do is, with the color is to signify kind of that threshold between the hallway and the classroom itself. And so that's why you're seeing some of the blue and the orange color differentiated. Inside the classroom, this is where you can have a little bit more fun, but some points that I want to make that are important for a classroom that you design for 2022, 2023 versus when this building was built First off, we're using a displaced air ventilation system. And so instead of having vents that blow down on you, it actually blows at a diffused slow rate from below and it's collected from above, which is a lot more hygienic as well as quiet. So it improves acoustics as well as incorporating technology into the room. When I went to school, the internet didn't exist. So there's a whole other thing where retrofitting schools like this. Every classroom will have two sinks, one for hand washing and one deeper for science experiments, and ways in which we can encourage flexible seating and cubbies and storage. That's one of the things we've heard so much from teachers is making sure that there's adequate storage. And you can see some of the colors behind the cubbies is to give a little bit of joy and delight as we look through the classroom. This is another rendering. What you're seeing, this door that's off to the left is the entrance to the room, as well as there's a communicating door to the other classroom for safety if one needs to exit the classroom from a secondary means. Adequate lighting, improved acoustics, ergonomic furniture, natural look materials, right? As well as making sure that all the materials that we put into this building are what we call red list free. In other words, that we avoid chemicals that we know cause issues in terms of development or sensitivities, and of course, daylight and views, as I've mentioned before. So I think one of the things we're going to touch right now, and happy to take questions, that was a really quick overview of many, many months of work, is to talk a little bit about how this building affects sustainability. Do you want to lead it off?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Mike Quinlan, Chair of the SBC. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm just going to, again, go through this pretty quickly. Obviously, these community conversations are meant more for dialogue back and forth, but we did want to provide some dialogue, some material to stir some conversation. But from a sustainability perspective, we explored how this building should be designed, and we did a lot of analysis from multiple perspectives. But a big trend right now in elementary school design, especially, is towards what's called a net zero building. And we've actually gotten approval by the Board of Selectmen to pursue that. And basically what that means is going to a building, first starting out with lowering the energy use consumption in the building to the lowest point possible, making sure we're not being inefficient. It means making sure our envelope is tight so we're not wasting energy. And then for that minimum amount of energy that we do need to run the building, providing renewable way to generate that. So that usually in this neck of the woods means photovoltaic panels. With the goal of getting to a point where the building and the site is actually producing enough electricity on its own to support the function of the building and does not require any fossil fuels, does not require anything from the utility companies in terms of energy usage. So this is very common these days. We actually have, I think, about 4 or 5 elementary schools going on in my office right now. And they're all at least exploring this, and most are actually pursuing it. So this is becoming something that has been put into the legislation. Massachusetts recently adopted net zero guidance in terms of getting buildings to a point where we're no longer burning oil or gas and creating a problem with both climate and just generally bad for the local environment as well. So we analyzed it, and basically in the long-term life of this building, which is going to exceed 50 years, it requires a small additional investment up front relative to the long-term operation. And that would allow us to get to a point where we could save money, and actually, once we reach a certain point, there's a potential we could end up actually generating some revenue if we get to a point where the technology is efficient enough in the photovoltaics that we can actually put electricity back into the grid. But the goal for the project is to be at net zero, and it's very complicated. So if anybody has questions on that, we could certainly respond to that. So how are we going to get there? I mentioned a little bit about the photovoltaics. But the main purpose, or the main point here is that we're going to an all-electric building. There will be no burning of gas or oil in the building. That will allow us to get to a point where we can actually generate electricity with photovoltaics to support the building, and we don't end up making the our environmental concerns worse than they already are in terms of climate change. So that, sorry, go back. So in order to heat and cool the building, we've chosen a geothermal system, which basically involves what's called a closed loop well, where we drill down 600 feet and water is circulated down into the ground where the temperature is very consistent. And so in the wintertime, when it's 20 or 30 degrees outside, the earth is at 50, 55, we can bring that water down, heat it up, bring it back in, and use that heat exchange to heat the building. And then the opposite cycle works in the summertime, where it may be 80 or 70 or 80 out in the summer. The ground's again at 50, 55, and we can bring the water down, bring it up cooled, and use that cooling within the building. So that's the main system, which you can kind of see there. That's a little bit of an old rendering with the building, but that's the concept of how we're going to heat and cool the building. And then again, in order to generate the electricity to run that, we're going to pursue photovoltaic panels on the roof. Next slide. So this just shows, as we did this whole evaluation, we were also looking at potentially what the financials are around increasing the area. The more photovoltaics we do, the more electricity we can produce, and potentially, as I noted, maybe there's a point where we could actually sell electricity back to the grid. That'll go away over time as more and more people do this, but we are exploring that option and considering the option for solar canopies or the parking lot. We're not pursuing that yet, but we are getting pricing just to sort of see where that'll all shake out. But we also are providing conduit out to the parking lots for electric vehicle charging spaces, which are becoming pretty pervasive these days as well. So as employees or even residents come and park there, they might be able to charge their electric vehicles if they have one. Right. Do you want to speak to this or should I?
So one of the questions that we get is, okay, so you build a building, what happens when things change? And one of the unique features of this building is that we have separated what we call classroom wing and, let's say, more academic or the social wing, so that if there was a need in the future to build more classrooms, there's ways in which you can do it. So in the classroom wing, what we were able to do is group on 2 different floors. So there's what we call staff. So one on top of the other, and on the camera. This is, again, I have a serious appreciation for teachers who do this hybrid. So if there was ever a need in which there had to be another grade coming in, or there needed to be a reconfiguration, the building itself is flexible because as you can see, there's groups of 4 and 5. So there's some opportunity to do that within the building itself.
Before you advance that,
Yeah, sure.
can you touch on why the difference between the blue and the purple and why that's laid out that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way the NSBA evaluates school projects is they like to make sure that there's different categories for different types of spaces. And the first category that they look at is core classrooms. So that's normally developed children who go to school, and usually that's a function of the number of students that you have. And so those are indicated by blue. But the ones that you see in purple are ones that are designated special education classrooms. And the district did a lot of work in terms of the educational plan, not just looking at the ways in which special education is delivered today, but how it's delivered in the future, and what would be the best way in which a building like this could support students. And so what you're seeing in the purple, and I'll point it out, there's in the lower, sort of the lower line of blue classrooms, you see something called the access classroom. And that's a self-contained special education classroom building on programs that Medfield already does. There's 2 of them, there's one on the front floor and one on the second floor, which is a greater capacity than what you have currently, as well as supporting spaces for the learning center, small group reading, small group math, dedicated office for IDP, consultations, and small group ELL. There's even a space for professional development. Why is it important to have these small catch spaces? Because many times you can see the greatest benefit with children working with them in smaller groups, as well as making sure that these spaces are distributed amongst the plan. You don't necessarily want to stigmatize or make sure that somebody has to go out of their way to get the services that they need. And so in this plan, to Mike's point, they're all in the center and equally accessible, both in distance, but also in visibility to all students. Is there anything that I missed on that?
Yeah, thanks.
So when you look at the overall plan, so what we were looking at earlier was just off to the left. You can see that the orange space is the cafeteria. That's, again, it's sort of in the center, and right across from that yellow space, which is the media center. We knew that these were large spaces, but also would help anchor the building itself. The gymnasium is towards the front. You might say, well, why is the gymnasium towards the front? It makes sense because the gymnasium could be used for community use after hours, right? And in that case, you don't necessarily want people walking into the school, into the classroom section. So it's been designed so that there can be a security barrier so that part of the school can be open for after hours, like events like this, without having to have a security issue of people walking towards the classrooms. And then the green that you see is the band and the art that I spoke about earlier, and general music. So when I was talking about future flexibility, if this building needed to be expanded, let's start with one project at a time. But if it had to be, there is ability to be able to build upon it as well as reconfigure the buildings that you have.
And that's a requirement of the MSBA.
Yeah, so thanks, Emily. Just one other thing on this plan, the red spaces here is the main administration suite, so that will be situated closely at the entrance. Obviously, that's a critical point from observation and security. And so you have the main entrance to one side, and what we often use the term community wing because it can be used by the community, which would include the gymnasium, and so that could be sealed off right about here, so that people could access this. They would come through the play area, and it's adjacent to the parking as well. This is just, so this is just the upper floor, same configuration here. At this point, this is roof area, and each sort of an atrium. That's where that sloping roof comes together to allow the skylights into the main corridor. So that's what we had for a presentation. Actually, I guess we could leave on this for a while, but it'd be good maybe to have the other image up just in case anybody has any questions on the plan. So just to kind of give you a quick idea of schedule and process, we're going to have a lot more conversations, more meetings over the next 2 months. We're looking at a early November, possibly first week in November, special town meeting, where this project will be voted yes or no. And that will be followed by a ballot. So it has to pass by 2/3 majority of town meeting. And then a ballot, it has to pass by 50% plus one, just a simple majority. So that's where we are with that in terms of process. We're going to have a lot more meetings, obviously. We are reaching out to all sorts of different constituency groups. We've been invited to New in Town, to Memo, to miscellaneously. We're going to go over to the COA and make sure everybody's up to speed and distribute as much information as we can. But again, we're here to answer questions tonight if anybody has them. So feel free to jump in if anyone would like.
2 questions online.
Okay.
Unless somebody wants to jump in live first.
Sure.
Okay. Tom Powers, can you provide comps? Sorry.
Tom Powers says, can you provide comps for similar sized towns of 12 to 14,000, spending 41 million per grade for elementary school buildings?
So dollar value per grade is not something we typically track, but what I can tell you is on very similar track, Westwood currently is building a project or is proposing a project on a very similar timeline as ours for 560 kids, which is actually 15 elementary kids less than ours. And that is an $87 million project. So that's about 5 to 7 million more than this budget will be. We're building a project for the town of Ashland right now. We're not building it yet. We're close to starting construction. That is 635 students. The way they configure their school system is somewhat similar to ours. So they're actually building a 3 to 5. It's actually 3 grades, which is something we looked at here. But that's for 635 students. That's an $84 million project. And again, that's a year ahead of us. So that's why the prices are a little different, because they are ahead of us. Just from a square footage perspective, the Westwood project is about 15,000 square feet larger. The Ashland project is about 10,000 square feet larger. But it gives you a frame of reference that this is absolutely within the range of similar projects that are being priced up and designed currently. Emily, I don't know if you have any other relevant. We are also doing a couple of projects in my professional office, a couple of projects for the town of Wellesley, one in the MSBA system and one without. And those are actually on a cost per square foot basis are higher than what Medfield as well.
We have the Lawrence Roach School that is 79 million and has 625 students.
Sorry, can you repeat that? We just moved the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Leftfield also has the Lawrence Roach Elementary School that's on the same timeline that's coming in at 79 million.
And how many?
625 students.
720, so it's 50. That's about 50 kids more.
It's probably about 6 months ahead of us.
Yes, the next question is, how much input, from Tracy Fedek, how much input did the teachers have in contributing to the overall school design?
So I'll defer to Jeff or Stephen or one. You guys are more to get Emily to.
Yeah, so I'll start with that. That's a great question and such an important question. So we started, Emily and I, it seems like yesterday, but it was probably about almost 2 years ago, where Emily had come in. She had meetings in our LMC with all the teachers. I remember she brought the cubes in to kind of arrange what buildings would look like and stuff. Again, left teachers plenty of time after she had left to make comments on design and what that would look like. Most recently, what we did is, I think it was in March of this year, we had visioning meetings with the teachers. So what I did as principal is I separated the teachers out by either grade level, department, and I really wanted them to privately meet with Emily and have no part of that, so they could speak freely on their minds. So we set up a schedule where we got substitutes in the classroom for those days. Actually, we didn't even have to do that. I think it was half days. So it was half days. So what we did is we stationed them in, and the teachers were able to go in. And Emily and I would debrief with also one of her colleagues, and they came up with the best idea. So I'd say Emily has had probably 3 different interactions with individual teachers in a long period of time. And also, I've had great feedback from the teachers as well, grade level, special education, and music, that I've forwarded to Emily as well. So I really feel great about this project, because I feel like it's a collaborative project. We're in the town, and as I think Anna Mae was saying before, having somebody like Mike Quinlan who does this for a living and having the committee that builds schools all over, I think we have the best building committee that anybody could ever ask for, but also the collaborative process that both Leftfield and Arrow Street puts in is really something. So yeah, great participation from all the staff, not just teachers in the classrooms, but also departments, special ed. And this went to the cafeteria staff, this went to our paraprofessionals, everybody, because if you work in the school, you're an educator. If you're dealing with children, you're an educator. So everybody was valued, everybody's voices were heard.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to work with your staff. And I think the only thing I would add is, it was not just me, it was many of my other team, and making sure that it fit into the solution that we have today. But, the depth in which we go into something as simple as, sitting with a nurse and asking what happens when you greet a kid, and making sure that they have the space they need, even having conversations about how do you deal with recycling with the building maintenance staff. So it's an in-depth And it's not just the teachers, it's everybody in the building. So that was a fantastic opportunity.
Emily, you might also add, it's not over. If the project is approved, there'll be many more.
Yeah, but to Mike's point, this will happen at least 2 more times when we go and we confirm, because the building has been designed for what we call schematic design phase right now, which means it's enough in which we can get an accurate price. But when we start to go further, you know, it's issues such as defining exactly where the electrical plugs go, making sure that we've got the sink in the right location, those types of details.
And just one more point on that, because I just saw it in the renderings, is something is, you know, it might be simple for the public, but hubbies. So what would happen is, you know, I would be with the grade level leaders, we'd talk about them, you know, Dr. Morrison said, okay, just make sure you sit down with them, make sure their voices are heard with that. So, you know, Arrow Street gave us, you know, probably 4, 5, 7 renditions of whether we could have them in the classroom, outside the classroom, what it would look like. So that was the most recent conversations that we had, probably May into June. Right as school was ending, but again, these teachers are so hungry for this that they, you know, even though it was the end of the COVID year and they had a lot of things going on, they made the time to come in right after school ended in the summer, and they were meeting on their own time just to make sure that their voices were heard with this. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. We have another question.
Before we go there, does anybody in the room have a question?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Already heard a couple of questions, probably to Mike, HVAC wise, 100% photovoltaic, that's the plan for electric generation.
The photovoltaics would be for electricity to
Yeah.
run the HVAC system, yes.
Right.
So, but the geothermal is what will heat and cool the air.
So, yeah, so that really is the plan for AC
Yep.
in the classroom, the whole building.
Yep, correct,
Through geothermal.
correct. That's standard now. It wasn't when I was in school, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's standard now, yeah.
Perfect, great. Also, some cost questions, want to save those?
Nope, you can ask them.
So voting in November, right? So thanks for explaining that, 2/3 and then 50% plus 1. That doesn't happen. Is there a view of cost today if that goes forward versus what it doesn't? By cost, you know, I've heard that 80 million, 85, that's hard to kind of get through. Is there a cost for taxpayer? Is there a view that kind of simple for folks to view?
So we're working on that. We're just about to finalize our overall budget. And then we're going to drill down into what does that mean? We're looking at financing interest rates right now. The town is working with their financial advisors and bond counsel to sort of give us a range of where we think the bonds will fall out, because, you know, people often only look at the price tag, but the interest rate is far more important over the life of the loan. It just makes a big difference. 0.5 point of interest is a significant cost over the life of the loan. So we're working on that with the town. I actually have a meeting set up next week to go through that. And then what we will do is lay out that in more detail this month for the taxpayers on what that's going to mean for the average tax home, or, you know, $1 cost per thousand of the assessed value. But our last estimate was somewhere in the neighborhood of $900 for the median price home in Medfield, which at the time was $675,000. That may change. So if your house is worth $1 million, it's going to be more than that. If your house is worth $500,000, it'll be less than that.
That's
But
a year.
that's a year, correct? That is per year, not per month. So yes, we recognize cost is a significant part of this. This is the largest price tag this town has ever seen. So that's absolutely something we're going to have a lot more detail on in the coming weeks.
Doesn't pass, vote, go back to the.
Thank you for reminding me. So if it fails, we have some options. We could do it on our own without the MSBA. We could start that right away. But that said, if we lose the MSBA's $18 million in support, we wouldn't, in today's construction dollars, we wouldn't be able to build a building that meets our current enrollment, let alone any growth. The other option is to go back to the MSBA and reapply. And that would take a minimum of 2 to 3 years. And then an additional year and a half to go through another feasibility study to get us back to sort of this point where we are on potentially with the vote. So we're looking at a 3 to 4 year minimum to get back to a point where we have a project to vote on. And with current escalation between 4 and 5%, we'd be looking at probably a 12 to 15% increase in the price, and an additional, like I said, an additional 3 to 4 years of time.
Thanks. One final one.
Sure.
I saw some cost engineering work that was being done. Do you feel like anything, so my goal would be to build a school, get it right, put everything in there that we absolutely want to. Sure. Regardless of site location. Do it now, spend the money, can't get it right. Do you feel like there's anything that's been sacrificed that you and the team would really want in there that you feel maybe taken out of the budget or the plan?
No,
make the number where we want to be.
No, so we look very closely at that. I can tell you from my perspective, having chaired the building committee, my approach to this town has always been to present what I believe is the best option, not the cheapest option. We have been very conservative with the design to make sure that it's, that it's efficient, that it's, appropriate, that it's not over the top. And we work very closely with the design team to do that, but still provide a project that's very nice for the kids. And we feel where this is shaken out, that we're comfortable, that there's no sacrifices being made at this point. And to get, say down a big chunk, it would mean cutting program. Like there's not fluff in this project that could easily be cut out.
Yeah, I think we need the other one. We need to add to.
No, I wouldn't get the other way because I wouldn't be comfortable proposing a project that I felt was not adequate and that was not meeting what a modern elementary school should be doing. So that's just the way I approach it. I'm not speaking for the entire building committee, but having worked with many of them for years, I think that's generally the approach we've taken with this project.
Just that point too, I think we're close to looking at programs. I think if we start looking at major reductions, especially on a couple of the areas that we thought were really important for this project, both the music space and the gym space, which go over what MSBA is going to reimburse. So those are 2 areas that we're going to have to, the town's going to have to pay all of it on, So I think if we start scaling that back, then yeah, we're going to be kind of sacrificing what we believe it should be for the schools. We're close.
Yeah, we consciously made a decision to have a little bit larger sized gym, mainly because of the lack of court space anywhere around town where all of our basketball teams are traveling, even for practices, because there's just no court space in town. And it's just big enough so that we could potentially subdivide it into 2 courts. We could play it as 1 court, but could subdivide it into 2 courts. So that was a conscious decision that we made. And then the other area was the music program. As Emily noted, Jeff noted, that's an area where there's a desire in town to really support that, and it currently doesn't. So we're trying to address that by making sure we have the spaces to accommodate the educational program that Stephen and staff put together with the consultants.
Yeah, thanks for that extra info. It helps me feel comfortable that we have looked at additional items that the town feels are important. And with that plan, not just stuff to what we're in school. Yeah, thanks for all your hard work.
Yep, absolutely.
Hi, Laurel Scotty. As a senior and a grandparent, I don't think the gym or cafeteria are oversized. If we attended any function at the high school or here, you know that there's not enough room. It's unhealthy. So I think the plan was look to the future and just the problem we have today. So I commend you. There's important meetings, they're envisioning. I mean, I did serve on the Townline Master Plan Committee, and they wanted to input at 12,000 population. We were thrilled to get 120 people, and that's only because we provided food. So I think that people have to realize, it's really easy to tear something apart, but it's much more difficult to be part of it from the beginning and build what you built. So I commend you for everything you've done.
Thank you. Is there another question online?
There are some more online questions. You want to go back?
Sure.
Yep. The next is from, so I've heard through communications that microphone's picking up a lot, so that's good. I've got a microphone in the audience.
Yeah.
This one's working as well, so this is good feedback. This is again from Tracy Fedek. How big would the classroom size be at the new campus compared to the size of classrooms at Dale currently?
I know the new ones are 900 square feet.
Yep.
Do you know?
They range from 6 to 7.
That's it. Again, another great question here. So we walk around with two sides of the building, one being about 1941, the other one being the 60s. The classrooms here range anywhere from 650 square feet to probably just about 700 square feet. So in the new building, as Mike said, there'll be 900 square feet is mandated by the MSBA. So any of our classrooms would go up at an additional 200 square feet. We really try to do that, look at that very seriously, especially last year after we had the social distancing that we had in the classrooms. Definitely was a challenge here with the building being as small as it is.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, so the MSBA, in order to have equity schools all across the state, they actually have minimum sizes for grades 1 through 6, which is, they have to be sometime between 850 square feet and 950 square feet. And so we landed on 900, which is, it's going to feel bigger than the classrooms today. So that's built for flexibility, how about that? Do you want to handle one of the other questions?
Okay, so we have
5
one
questions.
large question. So I'm going to break it in. There's 5 questions, so I'll start in order. This is from Christine Q. Potts. Number 1, specifically, when were Dale Street teachers engaged as a group in providing input specifically on site selection?
I don't know that we have the exact dates memorized at this point, so we'll have to follow up with the answer to that question.
Her second question is, what is the % increase in total impervious surface?
I don't know that I have that exactly. What I can tell you is that the building itself will occupy approximately 1.5 acres, about 60,000 square foot footprint, if I remember correctly. And then the parking lots, I don't have that off the top of my head. I want to say it's maybe an additional acre or so. But again, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I'll have to get back to you on that, Chris.
The third question is, what type of refrigerant will be used in the heat pump cooling system, and how will that be prevented from entering groundwater?
Again, that's a question for the engineers, but I don't have the answer to the specific refrigerant at this point.
Mass Department of Environmental Protection, Mass DEP, states a Zone 2, 2,640 foot radius to protect wells. Yet the building site is planned for 2,400 feet from where well 3 will be relocated. Our town bylaw is insufficient, and it's more problematic to have parking areas versus building in a Mass DEP Zone 2 area. How will being in a well protection area be mitigated?
The project will be designed to meet all codes and all bylaws. The project is being designed to Mass DEP standards. So it actually is being designed with a new stormwater drainage system that will actually separate out oils and things from the asphalt that our current system does not. So we're upgrading not just the new school, but the existing school as well. So that system will be designed to Mass DEP standards. It will all be approved through the normal permitting process to show that, again, this building does not pose a significant risk to our drinking water. We have multiple civil engineers who have chimed in on that and agreed, and we will take their advice.
The fifth question is, has a second phase of soil testing been conducted related to 50 gallons of oil spilled a number of years ago to ensure no contamination?
No, that has been identified by the initial geo-environmental. And basically the way, if this project proceeds, that will be addressed in the next phase. So there would be additional testing and ultimately whatever we find as part of this project would have to be cleaned up according to all Massachusetts regulations.
And Christine Q. Potts has a follow-up to question number 4. As a follow-up, will stormwater management handle 100% of runoff? Thanks, Chris.
In terms of how it handles runoff, the runoff is not calculated on sort of a general basis. It's based off of what's called a 100-year storm, which means a storm that may hit us once every 100 years. And so that looks at what that storm would look like. That's all based off of NOAA, the National Oceanographic, I forget the rest of it, Atmospheric Association, I think. So NOAA puts out for this region, you know, a guideline of what that would look like. What would a 100-year storm look like? And so the system has to be designed to accommodate that. And then there's also insurances put in place by tying into town sewer, which basically means that in the worst case scenario, we exceed that, there's a runoff would be off into the town sewer and not on site. So there are insurances put in place, but it would all be designed to meet those guidelines.
And there are some comments, but I think this might be a good pause to see if there's any additional questions in the audience. Spotlight's on you.
No. Doesn't seem so. Okay, well, good. We can get everybody home early tonight and we can maybe sweat a little bit less. But thank you all for coming. Again, keep up the speed. Hopefully everybody, I'm glad, I mean, everyone who's here is obviously engaged, but there's a lot more coming over the next 2 months. And please, you know, look at your calendars for early November, because we'll be sending out dates once they're finalized for the special town meeting and the ballot vote. But again, thank you all. And thanks to Emily, our technology, and Owen, our technology coordinators here, and Anna Mae, who, you know, has just, I don't know, I'd be lost without her support on the communication side. So thank you, everybody. And thank you to our team online, Lynn and Larry, and to all members of the public. So have a good night, everyone. No problem, Marty.
See you around the hood.
Yeah.
Wow.